And we are back with another podcast episode. And I have Karlla here, and she has been on the podcast before a couple of months ago during a winter episode. A lot of time has passed. I think about 4 months or something. I don't know. Definitely a couple of months have passed. We've talked, we've stayed in touch here and there. So it'll be interesting to catch up. And for those of you that have not listened or watched the first episode, definitely go and check out the first episode because it was really interesting. And so we're going to just see how the conversation goes. It's always really interesting talking to you. So, yeah, for those that are new, you can maybe introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Karlla. I'm from Liverpool in England, and I am an energetic healer and subconscious guide. I do a lot of work with the subconscious, reprogramming and cutting the cords that keep us tied. So whether that's trauma and experience using my gifts. I think sometimes it's really difficult to explain and find tangible words for something that's so esoteric and woo. So every time I explain what I do or who I am, it changes. But the cusp of the matter is that a lot of what I do is all to do with the soul. It's all to do with our subconscious, and not much of what I do is a tangible kind of thing. It's more to be felt and experienced.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good explanation because I feel we're constantly shifting in how we work with people because our own experiences are constantly influencing us. Because I believe, like, I asked you the same question a couple months ago, and you probably said something similar, but you've also changed. So you're going to introduce yourself in a different way. And I think I said the same thing to my friend Alexis, who has been on my podcast a few times now, too. And you always are going to just grow constantly. And I feel like the past couple of months have been really crazy for a lot of people because I remember we were talking and we could feel this pressure building of something big building. And that's what I felt for months, something building energetically. And now I feel we're in the middle of this thing that's unfolding for us. And it's good stuff and bad stuff and just all kinds of stuff unfolding. Like, is that something that you've experienced these past couple of months?
Yeah, I think it's being kind of, I think you sent an email out something similar about the chrysalis, like that kind of cocoon period. And I can feel what it feels like now is like those layers are coming away, and I'm being asked to step up, show up, and claim my authority, like in my arena. I'm always doing lots of work. So if you have me back in 4 months' time, I'll probably like, well, I'm Karlla and I do this and I do that. And it's probably going to evolve and be something different again. I think that's the beauty of the path and being a heart-led worker, that it does change and evolve, although I'm still very much doing what I was doing 5, 6, 7 years ago in terms of the space that I hold. I think energetically it changes, and then I get more of a conscious understanding of what's going on energetically that helps me to convey it. I think when you asked me on the last podcast, I actually laughed and I was like, well, I don't know who I am and what I do. So I think even that evolution in the last 4 months has allowed me to really be a lot more confident in who I am. And I think that is thanks to being in that bubble and really taking the time to look and understand what it is that I do so that I can show up more confidently and explain what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a lot of people felt like I have no idea where I am, what I'm doing, or I do this and I do that and I do a little bit of all this stuff. But how do I name that? What's the name of that? And I found too, like I do so many things, but what exactly is it? And then I came up because my Instagram got disabled for a week or something. And I was like, huh, why did that happen? But then I thought it's like God is redirecting me and saying, because that's like the old energy. You need to be in this new energy. And so I made a new Instagram and I named it the Gnostic Dragon Witch. And it was like immediately, I'm like, yeah, because that's who I am. I'm a Gnostic that works with dragons and witchy stuff. That's what I do. So that's basically, that sums it up. I do all of that stuff.
I think it's just, I can, I'm probably repeating myself a little bit, but I just think it's so difficult to, and a lot of experiences that I've had, people like, oh, what happened? Well, I can't really, there's no kind of words in any language to describe a feeling. And I think we're always working with feelings, aren't we? And energy, that sometimes the proof's in the pudding. You've got to do what it is that we're offering to understand fully maybe the depth and the power of what's being offered. I think you can read a sales page and get the gist of what it is, but without actually sitting and feeling it yourself, you can't marry up a sales page to the feeling. And I think, I'm hoping that that's probably something that the world's gonna move more towards as we move into an era where people are valuing experience over things and stuff. I'm hoping that more people will push out of their comfort zones and come and try, because I think there's a spectrum to spirituality. You've got your mainstream meditation, yoga, those kinds of, like, everyone understands it, we know it's good for us and we should do more of it. But I don't think I don't think it's as mainstream accepted the same, the energy side of things, in terms of how important it is to have a broad spectrum of esoteric practices at your disposal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think more and more people, there's even people that I've talked to before that were not into spirituality, they were not into any of this, and they are starting to have experiences that they cannot explain. And they're like, I cannot measure this with degrees, with like levels of expertise or whatever. Their system is failing them, like the system that they use to measure the experiences in their life as valuable or not valuable, it's not working. And they're looking for different things, because like I'm noticing that there's different people approaching me that a year ago were like, never thought about dragon stuff, never thought about any of this, but there's like dragons coming into people's meditations. And they're like, I'm just some lady working at the bank, I don't know what's happening. Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm noticing that is happening. And the people that were already on this path, their journey is becoming more fine-tuned. They are not afraid. Like I think in the past a lot of us were keeping it very general, like we are spiritual practitioners, we do healing, we do tarot readings, blah blah blah. And I'm seeing that, like in my friend group anyway, of the people that are doing this spiritual work, that they're becoming more fine-tuned and they're not afraid of explaining to people, look, I work with unicorns, I specialize in unicorn healing, I work with dragons, I'm going to connect you to your dragon guide and do trauma healing with you and your dragons and stuff like that. And it's becoming normal to do something very unique. And we're seeing that there's specific people that are going to be drawn to that medicine. They are like, oh yeah, I'm ready for that, that's what I'm looking for. So that's what I've been noticing. And people, like I've been doing texting now with people, like text service, intuitive texting basically, instead of video calling for people that don't really have the time for video chat or something. And a lot of them are like, I'm finally ready. Like people that have been on the fence for years, that have spiritual gifts, but they were like, I'm not going to do anything with them, I'm not ready. And now they're like, I'm feeling that I'm ready, I'm feeling that I'm finally ready to share this with the world. That's what I'm noticing too.
I've been speaking with people who do things that are quite, I'd say, quite palatable. They do a lot of counseling and therapy, like mainstream degree based roles. And I'm finding that I'm getting more people coming to me and going, I want to be spiritual. And then when you really dig into the work that they're actually doing, I'm like, you know that what you're doing is actually channeled, and it's the same as what I am doing, in a sense of the way that you're being intuitively led to look at trauma in the body and stuff like that. And I found it quite interesting, like you say, that there's people that 12 months ago, 18 months ago were probably like, oh, I'm not spiritual, I can't channel energy, that are now, they've actually been on the path without being on the path, and they're just opening the esoteric side of things. I've seen a few people like, oh, I really want to be psychic, and I'm like, well, you are. The work that you're doing, like, that's completely channeled from spirit. It's so heart-led, the work that you're doing, that it can't not be channeled from spirit. But because they are academic, for want of a better word, because they're academic, they've tried to logic it and make it kind of fit into the boxes that we've been conditioned to think that things need to fit in for it to be tangible, or for it to be kind of understood. I'm finding a lot more of those type of people are also like, how does my work link in with that kind of work? And it's interesting who is now wanting to do these things. There was a conversation that I had the other week, and it was, I remember 10 years ago that there was like one lady in the whole of my city that did this kind of work, and I'd go to her and I'd like tap in and I'd be like, it's mad, all of this stuff. But now you only have to, there's someone that does this type of work, like every other person is kind of like drawn into these practices. And it's lovely how the world is coming to understand the power of the unknown, really. I'm quite enjoying this in terms of it being normalized. I also think that there has been there's been like a crumble of the ones that were riding the waves at the beginning, that kind of cashed in when it wasn't as popular, but maybe weren't as heart-led. That seems to be dwindling down, and you're seeing lots of people who are really authentic and genuine being left. And I thought that's been quite interesting to watch over the last kind of 12 months. People who maybe initially made a lot of money because there wasn't that many people around, as more people are offering these services, those ones have kind of dwindled down. And that, I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, you said a lot of stuff that I want to remember, so I have to archive it in my brain, have to remember. But yeah, there's people everywhere that have normal jobs, and they're like, I want to do something more intuitive, I want to be more psychic, like you said. And the fact that they have this desire to want to do this means that they can apply it in what they're already doing. Because I have people, they're like, oh, should I become a healer, should I be a psychic, should I blah blah blah. And I'm like, maybe, and then they're like, but I also like teaching, I also like working in finances, I like working in the hospital, I like being a nurse, I like doing this and that. And then I'm like, you're not supposed to quit one thing, you're supposed to change it from the inside out with your desire to be more intuitive. So, because like one of my clients that I've worked with off and on is an orthodontist, and she may be watching this. Hi, Jennifer. And she created this beautiful practice where she is very intuitive in how she interacts with her clients, and like the colors of the walls are even intuitively picked to have a psychological soothing effect on the clients. She placed crystals like in specific locations, just so like stuff like that. And that is stuff that comes from past lives, and then they're channeling that in this lifetime. Or like you can own a restaurant and say, I want to be intuitive. You can be an intuitive cook, you can put intention in your food, and the people that are going to come to your restaurant are going to feel that the frequency of your food, of the restaurant, is really nice, I think. And that's what we're looking because when you look at Atlantis, or you look at like more elevated societies, consciousness wise, that is how they were. Everyone was just more conscious. There was more intention in what they were doing. They weren't just feeding a system and keeping a system going. And I think not everyone's going to be some oracle. That's not the point of consciousness expansion. We need to bring consciousness into the systems that exist so that we can change them, like education, for instance. More teachers are becoming disillusioned with the educational system. More parents are becoming disillusioned and are choosing to homeschool or sending their children to alternative types of education. And I think we did talk about that a little bit in the old podcast, but I'm definitely seeing how that is happening. And I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more of that stuff happening. And you can see it in politics. People are done with things that may have worked 10 years ago, or that they just said yes to 10 years ago. They're done with it. They're like, this is getting ridiculous. This looks like just a mockery right now, or something. I'm not saying specific. Everyone knows what I mean, but and then the second part of what you were saying about these gurus, let's call them that, they are kind of, we're seeing who is still in it because they have the right intentions, and we're seeing who started maybe with good intentions, but then, and that's been my frustration. And I'm constantly checking in with myself, like, am I jealous? Do I want to be as big as they are? But that's never the answer. It's like I'm seeing how there's really big names saying all kinds of stuff online that is just not at all true. And I even believe, I would be willing to go as far as to say that some of these are deliberate infiltrations into the spiritual community, because if every system is infiltrated by negative energies, if education, if the media, if the financial system, blah, 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 is infiltrated, why wouldn't they infiltrate a system like the spiritual awakening community? Why? That's naive to think that there's not going to be infiltration on purpose. And a lot of these people are becoming exposed. I feel we're seeing, like, I think it was Kryon. I don't know if you know Lee Carroll, who channels Kryon. He predicted the end of 2024 is when we will see who is actually in alignment, and the darkness is going to be exposed, is what he said. So we're about there, the end of 2024. So I'm curious.
Really interesting, isn't it? I had a really lovely point. That's something that I talk about quite a lot, is the rainbows and unicorns kind of fluffy nonsense is the only way that I've got to vocalize kind of the thoughts, in terms of everyone wants everything to be rainbows and lights, and for this path to be all angels and harmony, and I'm quite vocal myself in like my spaces, in letting everyone know that just as there is light and dark on earth, there is light and dark in the ethers and the realms in which we work with. And I think that was a really lovely point in what you said. I think we had a chat, I'm going to flit here, we had a chat about this, didn't we, in terms of reptilians infiltrate, and I think this was offline, not in the last kind of podcast, was about reptilians being able to infiltrate this kind of realm and spirituality. And I wholeheartedly agree with you in terms of having people that might necessarily, they believe that they're channeling the light, but you can only, and something that I say quite a lot is, you can only meet another person as deep as you meet yourself. So if you've been swept up in the love, light, peace, and you're not actually doing that kind of dark, deeper stuff, you're only going to be able to channel to that level of consciousness that you've got. And I think, going off on a little tangent, because this is the kind of stuff that I like to talk about and bring to people's awareness, because I think I was thinking about this today actually. I think sometimes my page can come across as quite negative because it's not all positivity. I will say, like, I've been on this path for 10 years, but I've still got anxiety. Like, it's not something that I can just switch off or turn off from. I'm not depressed and deeply sad, but I'm still quite anxious, and I still have ADHD, and I still have all of these kind of things. Because I think what a lot of like this kind of mainstream wellness does is just perpetuates the unrealistic expectations that are embedded throughout the kind of mainstream world. Like, if you sit and you yoga and you get up at 5 a.m. and you have cold baths and you do meditation and you become spiritual, everything's going to be all right. And I think that's why I'm quite vocal in being like, well, it's not all love, light and peace. Like, there's the polarity of everything. I met someone a few months ago and they were like, oh, I've done all the work, I'm completely healed. And I just kind of giggled, and I was like, well, that's not how this works, type of thing. Like, you don't arrive at a point as the Messiah. Like, that's just not how this is going to work. Like, we live in 2024. I doubt that anyone's really going to reach Buddha level enlightenment that stays in a conditioned system, because there's always going to be something, isn't there? There's always going to be something you can question and you can unpick. And I think that's what that kind of mainstream spirituality is perpetuating, the illusion of the Maya of perfection, the Maya of reaching a point. I think that's why I'm quite vocal in it being a path, because it's not a destination, it's the journey that's important. Like, and how, yeah, I think that I'm gonna stop because I'll end up going off on like 90 tangents.
Yeah, but I like it. I like when you get off on a tangent, because it always like sparks a bunch of stuff in my brain that I have to then remember. But like, there's 5 things that I wanted to, that I have was like, let her finish first, let her finish first. But yeah, basically I agree with everything that you said, because that is the, like, it is tempting when you first awaken. You are going to be looking for this information. You're going to be looking for this information, and that is what the controlling powers, I don't like saying controlling powers, but because they're not really controlling anymore, they're kind of out of control. That's why the world is such in chaos, and it is like there for everyone to see. It's there for everyone to see that it's becoming chaotic, that the systems that have kind of operated the world are losing their control, and it's there for everyone to see, which means, and it's also Laura Eisenhower. I don't know if you've ever heard of Laura Eisenhower, but she goes deeper into a lot of the stuff that many people in the spiritual community, they don't want to look at it, like artificial sort of webs that are being kept in place to lower consciousness, collective consciousness. But once you have an awakening, you kind of deactivate that net, and your frequency is higher than the collective kind of net or web that they have spun around Earth. Because we're basically, that's what she says, in an artificial 3D state, because the traditional original state of Earth was a 5D planet, and then they placed this artificial web over the planet. And again, this is all part of the bigger plan of source, of God, that we had to see, oh wait, we don't have to choose this old system. We can choose to be sovereign in a system that is not working for me. And if one person says that, then another person says that, and more people start to say that, that web is going to receive so much pressure that it bursts, basically. And that's what we're seeing now in the world with all the chaos happening, is basically the tension on this artificial web. It cannot not hold it anymore. And there's a few channelers that have said that between 2027 and 2032, there's going to be, this chaos is kind of going to come to some kind of climax where a big shift is going to take place. And I'm always saying that we are in Atlantean times all over again, but the opposite. We're going the opposite direction. we are going back to like a golden age and not necessarily a new Atlantis, because we don't want that either. Now we have different ways of living, different systems, but we want to kind of become more conscious. We want to bring a higher consciousness level to what we're doing now. And there was something else you said that I was going to respond to, but it's gone. So yeah.
I think you can see it, can't you? And I had this conversation with my partner the other night in terms of, I mean, in England, anyone who's following England, like there's just chaos everywhere. There's the divide, the poverty wealth gap is ever increasing. The politics system is a bit of a sham, without making it political or like whichever end of the stance that you sit on. But you can see within the media that the people in power are scared. They are losing control of the people that they've had for hundreds of years, since the introduction of law and parliament and division and all of those things. And you can see that as they lose control, it's making like humans struggle to meet their basic needs. So I think this is a lot of like the cost of living crisis, which I think is like, it's global. But obviously I'm in university, so there's like this academic spiritual side of me, like all of these parts that I'm like amalgamating together. But if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our basic needs is for food and shelter. So I believe that if we are distracting the humans with their basic needs for food and shelter, then they can't climb up the ladder to these places of self-actualization and consciousness. And I do think that that is kind of on a higher order. Not to say that our government sat and gone, everyone's getting too conscious, let's like make them scramble to meet the needs. But I just think in part of that the great cosmic war between the light and the dark, those kind of elements are there to drag people back down. Because if you're scrambling day to day to feed your children or to find somewhere to live, then how are you ever going to sit and self-actualize, because you haven't got that time. And you can see it just playing out all over the world. I don't watch the news, so it's only like my partner still does, so we'll be like, oh, have you seen this or have you seen that, or it'll pop up on social media. So little things will like come into my awareness. I tend to not pay it much attention. I think when I done Reiki 1 probably about 7 years ago, a bit of the advice was don't watch the news because it lowers your vibration. And since then it's kind of just been something that I've unplugged from. But when you start to put it all together like a jigsaw puzzle, you can just, I see it in that sense, in kind of, it's like the battle against consciousness, if you will.
But I agree, because I was thinking that the other day, like, okay, I can get up, I can do my morning routine. And I posted something in my Substack chat. I posted like, what is your morning routine, for like people that follow me on Substack. And somebody said, oh, I do like my typical morning yoga. Another person does something with crystals. Another person makes like a specific tea that they drink every morning that they take their time for. And they're like, okay, we get to do this, but we get to do this because we made the choice to step out of that system. And yeah, you often get judged by others that are afraid in your place, that are like projecting their fear onto you, like, what are you doing? Oh no, why would you do that? And that there's no security in what you're choosing. But if you devote yourself to a job for somebody else, you are often being completely underpaid for your time, because that is time that they are taking away from you, that you could be spending with your loved ones, that you could be spending enriching your own life, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever. And you have to then take that time and be compensated for that. And we are definitely not being compensated for that in an honest way. When you look at the systems, just look at like the food industry, the low wages that people get working in the service industry and restaurants, they barely get anything, and they work long hours. and they're exhausted. Or I used to have a job cleaning houses part-time, and I did that alongside my spiritual business for 2 years because I wanted something easy that I could make some money with and build up my spiritual business. But there were tons of coworkers that did this full time, that had no choice. They needed to do this full time, and they were completely exhausted, and they barely made anything. Like they made enough to buy food, and that's it. And that is definitely a part of the bigger system, because there is enough food in the world. There could be enough food in the world, let's put it that way. There could be enough land to feed everybody in the world. There could be enough money so that everyone could actually be comfortable, but it's all in the wrong hands. And that's what it is. And it is definitely, I think it is definitely part of a bigger plan to delay the consciousness, the rising of the consciousness of humanity. It is definitely part of a bigger plan. But there are people. This podcast is getting very good. It's going in the direction of like being rebellious against the system, but that's good. But yeah, because I'm actually going to be having a very interesting podcast with somebody in a little over 2 weeks that has experience with reptilians, has experience with like a satanic ritual abuse, all these things, and we're going to dive into all these things. But I feel that we are definitely still in some kind of a slave system. We're getting paid, but you are not getting enough. Like, look at the price of housing, like you said, is going up and up, and it's just impossible for, if you are single, imagine you're single and you need to pay everything on your own. It's impossible. It's almost not possible. So you would have to, and then we see from that emergency situation of this is impossible, people are starting to look for new systems. They are coming up with alternative systems because they have to. So these oppressing powers, what they are actually doing is pushing people to still finding solutions under pressure. And that's how we see these alternative little schools being started up by parents that are starting up healthier, conscious types of education that are not connected to the system, that don't cost a bunch of money. We see people co-housing, building new types of houses, little communities together where they can work together, grow a vegetable garden together, put their money together, and actually live in a nice house and help each other. We see those types of things are now starting to become more and more normalized, where in the past you would have been like, oh, you're a hippie, you're living in some commune with a bunch of people, that's super hippie. Now it's normal. It's like, oh, that's a smart way of solving a problem. It's becoming more normal.
The humans since the beginning of time have always been resourceful, and there's always, I love the fact that you said that we're starting to rebel and get into those kind of conversations. I think that's just who we are as people anyway, isn't it? It's like, if you tell me to do something, I'll do it opposite 10 times just because you told me not to do it. That's like the kind of way that I work in general. And I think they're the people that are starting those communities and and creating those spaces are the ones that are like, this isn't right. I mean, I'll always probably pivot back to education in general, because that's kind of like they're the next generation, aren't they? They're the next future leaders and politicians and doctors, nurses, lawyers. They're like the future of the world. But education for me, I think, is a really interesting one. And I've got an older daughter who's 19. She's just finished mainstream education and is going to university. But then I've got a 10-year-old and I'm starting to look at high schools. So obviously, because we've been through like the secondary system, I kind of have an understanding of what I want and what I don't want for my son. And I cannot find it for love nor money. Everywhere that I go, there's always just one thing. And I think as a conscious woman, I think there has to come a point when I'm helping people to undo their conditioning and undoing all of the things that education system done to me and done to lots of people from our generation, there comes a point where I have to sit and really look at myself and go, how long can you continue to allow your son, the younger one, to keep being conditioned by the system? And I think, I don't know what that fine line is between home educating and mainstream school, because I think it's really difficult, and it's without, like, you do you, hun, whatever it is that you want to do with your children, that is beautiful and amazing, and everyone can do what they want. But I think for me, I don't want to homeschool. Like, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that I'd get pleasure from. I think it'd be quite testing on my relationship with my son, who has additional needs. It'd be quite difficult to spend 24/7. I like having me time. I don't know where I'm going with this. I think it's having that middle ground of something that works, isn't it? And I think it's really difficult as a conscious woman to know what is best to do, because you've got one side of the fence going, well, we're just going to home educate and we're just going to remove ourselves from the system and it'll be lovely and barefoot and gorgeous. And the opposite flip side of that is going to school, getting conditioned, wearing a uniform, becoming a sheep and a number in a big exam factory, which is so far removed from what I want for my son. But I think as a woman, especially, I'm just going to go off on a complete tangent here, but as, like, we grew up in the 90s, Spice Girls, girl power, female empowerment, we can have it all and do it all. No, we can't. You can't do everything and be everything to everyone, but we've been conditioned to make our own money. I don't need the help of no man. This whole, like, feminism has gone to its extreme, that women are burnt out trying to do it all. And I think that's kind of where I'm going with that, in terms of, I don't want to do it all. I don't even want to do half of the stuff that's expected of me, so without taking on more. So I think it's interesting to see what I'm going to do with my son. That's going to be really interesting. Come back to me in August next year and I'll tell you what I decided. But also to see how that's going to shape the education system and this alternative education system. I'm really interested to see where that's going to go moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is also what we don't have to then expect parents to do everything themselves. Because look at the Essene community, for instance, the mystery school of the Essenes. They had specific people that enjoyed teaching. They liked it. And they would then be like, hey, I enjoy teaching and I know a lot about gardening, history, astronomy. Send your children to me and I will tell them. And it just happened organically. Or there was somebody else that said, I'm really good at math. Send your children to me and I will teach them. And I think that is more where we are going, where we're going to be living together in smaller communities. And I'm not telling like in 5 years, but like in 100 years, I can definitely see how there's going to be organic, tiny communities that are being formed spontaneously, where people are just living their lives. Like, you may be like, I'm painting, I don't know, I'm painting, and there's a kid and he's like, oh, that looks nice, I want to learn how to do that. There's 5 kids that gather, fine, and suddenly I'm teaching them an art class. And then there's going to be somebody else gardening, and there's children that are going to be, their natural interests are going to be fed and nourished because they're going to be allowed to just become themselves. They're not going to have to all be the same in this system. And school education could just be way more natural and organic, and children can way quicker learn what they want to do in life. Because now we exit school, we're 18, like, what do you want to do? I have no idea, because you have been conditioned to believe that school is not fun, that learning new things is not fun, unless you had the privilege of getting a choice earlier on. Like, I was 13 and my dad said, you do not belong in a normal school because you're miserable, and he sent me to an art school. And that's where I did the rest of my high school. I did art academy and I loved it. But not everyone has that opportunity. Most children, they go through the regular school system, and they are miserable and burnt out at 18, and they're like, I have no idea. But when I was in Spain, my daughter was unschooled. She was just living with me, and for me it worked because I have a teaching degree and I enjoyed teaching her. But she did a lot of learning during just daily activities. I would go to the store and I told her, you keep track of all the stuff we're buying, you count everything, and you're going to pay at the register. And she wanted to because she's very social. She's very extroverted. So she's like, oh, I have to do a good job at this. So you're motivating them from within to learn math, for instance. Or I'm cooking. She wanted to see, what are you doing? She's learning about vegetables. She's learning about time again, learning about numbers with cooking. And it's stuff like that. And then she did go to a regular school. She's in the regular educational system right now. And they were all surprised at the math level that she had, and writing and reading. And I was like, whoa, I'm surprised, because I thought for sure it was going to suck, because I didn't really do that much with her. But they're all like, her reading is really good, her writing is really good. But she kept an entire travel log. She had a diary of her travels in Spain, and she would write in it every day, like a little like a memoir, her memoir basically, of Spain. And that's how I think the future is going to be more like that. And children are also going to demand it from their parents, because we see more and more. Because I read something the other day on Instagram, somebody said that scientists predicted that in 10 years' time, about 75% of all children are going to be neurodivergent. So that we're going to have to look at the system, because maybe it's not, there's nothing wrong with people. It's the whole system that is just not serving humanity.
See, we discussed that last time, didn't we, in terms of, I don't actually think there is more neurodiversity than there ever has been. I think we're just more aware of the nuances of people. The education system doesn't necessarily fit the modern child, and we're coming up with all these labels and these, yeah, all these labels of this is who this is and that's who that is. But I think what it is there's we call them Gen Alpha, don't they? So my son is part of Gen Alpha. They're just a completely different kettle of fish that we're dealing with. And I think with the age gap of you can see the difference in my children. My son, very much, we conscious parent, we chat, we talk, we discuss things and like that. But he's going to be the one who is advocating for his own rights without any concern of doing that. I mean, sometimes I'll ask him a question like, can you do this? And like, no, I don't want to. Why don't you want to do it? Because I'm my own person and I own my own body and I make my choices. And I think sometimes it's difficult to find the balance between raising these future humans and parenting sometimes, because I want him to be like that when he goes out into the world, but please just go and get in the bath and just do what I'm asking for 5 minutes. But I can see, you were saying about I can, where I'm arriving for him is like a flexi school kind of agreement, in terms of where we both have that nice balance where I personally think English and maths, having that understanding of numeracy and literacy is quite important, because it governs everything else. We wouldn't be able to do what we do if we weren't able to read literature and have that understanding of the reading comprehension and understanding what we're doing. So where he goes and he does English and maths, but then we go fishing, or we go and do more outdoorsy stuff that leans more towards his strengths, because compared to my daughter, he's not academic per se, he's not book smart, but that's not to say that his other skills and his areas and his talents can't be nurtured and cultivated for him. And I think you said about every child being the same. I think it's really difficult, isn't it, when you've done, say, 5 to 18, being told English, math, science, all of these things, and had literally your skills and your talents squashed and put in a box, to then ask children at 15, 16, 17, 18, what do you want to do with your life? Well, I don't know, because I've only ever been told that these paths exist. And I think what we need to look at as a society is honoring and understanding like the nuances of humans and what we come with our talents. I think that's, it's really important that we don't make academia the kind of be all and end all of everything. Like, you got to pivot and go to art school, and that helped you cultivate your skills and your talents. I was that one in school that was outside looking through the door like, miss, can I come back in? Because it didn't light up my talents and passions, and I got bored. And then kind of there was all these behaviors, but behavior really is just our way of explaining that you're not meeting our needs. And I think as teachers, as educators, if we've got signs of behaviors which are symptoms of the unmet needs, that we need to start looking at ways of channeling that energy and that creativity into other things. Because I only ended up going back to education in my 30s, because I not hated learning, I've always loved learning, but that kind of that academic, that staying in your box and doing your thing. What I've kind of learned over the last like year of being in university is that it's so different to kind of 5 to 18 education, in a sense of the tutors are like, we love the way that you think. And like, they were the things in school that people like, go outside the classroom, you can't question me, you can't kind of have a different opinion. And I think that puts a lot of people off maybe going back to education when they're older, because we believe it's still that draconian, sit down, be quiet, wear a uniform, you're a number kind of education, that we kind of box ourselves off from it, don't we, as the rebel, that maybe we shouldn't be in those environments. But I think we've discussed this previously, haven't we? Like, when I was like, oh, I'm going to leave uni because I can't be bothered with it anymore. It's having these voices in those spaces that are going to bring about these changes, which is why I'm doing the education, because that is where my heart lies, is with the children and making that difference. Yeah, like this has been a little bit of a tangent, and that's why we decided not to have a script, wasn't it, or questions, or knowing what we were doing, because we always just whisked off onto other paths of conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember, because for the people that are new to Karlla, that did not listen to the first episode, I met Karlla because she reached out to me online, and I think you found my webinar that I did, the one about the soul contracts and stuff. And then you said, hey, I would like to work with you for a month and do some video calls. And you had just started university, I think a couple months earlier, and you were like, I really love this, but I feel like I want to stop. But I also don't want to stop. And then we worked through that, and I kind of always kept on like bouncing the ball back to you, and like, what is it that you really want to do? Because I'm not going to give you the answer. You have the answer. We're just going to have to get it out of you. And then you ultimately indeed said, I want to stay in the system because I am passionate about doing what I do, but I want to do it from within the system. And because you can make the changes not from outside, but from inside these systems. And I definitely do understand people that completely remove themselves from any systems, that are living on a piece of land with some other people, other families, raising their children like that. And I think they serve an important role too. They are there for us to see what life could be like for everyone. And they are now kind of taking on this role of the hippies, or like, oh yeah, you're the crunchy mom or whatever, you're doing things differently. But it's going to inspire people that are in these systems, and they're going to be like, but that looks nice, that actually looks fun, that looks relaxed, I wish I could do that. And then they're going to start to little by little make these changes in the systems.
Absolutely. And I think you need that mirror of what life could be, to as something to look to. I think if we're told that this is the only way that there is, that's when we get kind of trapped within that, well, this is all that there is. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think there was a great analogy that you shared with me in one of our conversations, was in terms of not like a hierarchy, but when you've got a business, you've got people that do this, and you've got people that do that, and you've got people that do this, and you need like your post workers, and you need like your boss and the MDs and stuff. I think it's really important to understand, because I think within our kind of industry and our world, everyone wants to be the channel, or everyone wants to do like the stuff that looks fun or whatever, that we're forgetting the importance of like our roles. So being within the system and being spiritual, I think we discussed that at the beginning, didn't we? Like working in a bank and being spiritual, working in a school, or wherever it is that you're shining your light, is equally just as important to the bigger picture overall, and bringing in the new consciousness on earth. And I think that's what we need to remember. I think we discussed it last time, didn't we, in terms of if everyone leaves the system, then who's going to help the people that are still in the system? And I still kind of sit by that thinking, as much as I'd love to probably go and live in the woods and have my boobs out and just be in the woods and doing none of this kind of stuff, I think we have a life path, and we've had all of these experiences for a reason. I was that naughty kid with the undiagnosed ADHD causing havoc, so that I have this compassion and empathy and understanding for those children that are still there today. And I think I'd be doing myself a disservice and probably creating a lot of karma for myself if I just went and lived in the woods. I don't think I'd end up feeling fully fulfilled, because that's not my path, and that, I think that's okay. And I think you said you can tell when people have been on their journey that long, when they go full circle and right, okay, I'll stay and I'll do my work. I think because at the beginning, I think we all just want to run away, don't we, and just live our best hippie life, and because it's easy and it's nice and it's lovely, but maybe that's not the destiny for some of us. Not to say that when I retire, I'm not going to go and live in a commune, because that sounds like absolute bliss.
I think we've had those lifetimes too, in past lives, where we have had those hermit lifetimes, where we have had those typical mystery school lifetimes, where we were devoted to the temple, where we were just living the spiritual stuff because we're supposed to bring it back. That's why I always say that this is like a modern mystery school. You have to do your shopping, you have to do your pay your bills, you have to all the stuff, all the earth stuff. You have to do all this stuff, and you have to bring consciousness into all of this. And that's the true spiritual lesson, is like anyone can go and live in the mountains and be super spiritual, because they're never confronted with conflict. They're never confronted with people that may not be as conscious, that may get angry in traffic. How are you going to respond? How are you responding when somebody does something that's unpleasant? So that's where the true lessons are. And there was something else I was going to say, but it's gone. I don't know.
I think the cusp of what we're saying is we all have a role, and it's just as important as each, no matter whether you choose to stay in the system or you choose to live in the woods. Like, everyone's decision is what's best for them, isn't it? Yeah, sometimes I'd really love to go and live in the woods, I think, is the cusp of it, but HR said that I'm not allowed.
Yes, yesterday when I was texting with you, we were texting yesterday, and we said HR doesn't have any instructions for the podcast. We're just going to have a conversation. And that's really on a soul level. You have to look at it that way. You're here as an employee of God Inc. And I think that's what we said in the last one too. And if you look at it that way, you can see yourself more as playing a role, taking on a role, that you are here, you're taking on a position in the company of God. And that's what you are doing. And we're all here, like you said earlier. Some people have to do the mail, some people have to do customer service, some people, and to keep the system going, the system of planet Earth, everyone has to do their role. And no, we cannot all be like the gurus, we cannot all be the oracles, blah blah blah. And I'm starting to come to a point where I want to do normal things. And I mean normal things, like I used to crochet a lot, and I paint. Of course, everyone knows I paint, I draw. But then when I got pregnant with my daughter 10 years ago, I was like, I cannot be painting all the time, because what if then she's born, she needs me, I'm covered in paint, this isn't going to work. But I need to express myself in a creative way. So I started crocheting and knitting. And then I started making a bunch of stuff. And I ended up even making dog bow ties for dogs, and dog sweaters and dog pillows and all this stuff, and jewelry and more stuff with crystals on it, and sweaters and purses, all kinds of stuff. But it was all very practical stuff, like practical things like baskets, rugs for the floor. And I really enjoyed it. And it, to me, it felt very spiritual, because I got very balanced from it. And right now I'm working more on some crochet stuff, and I'm going to start to offer it. And I'm like, should I offer this on my website? Because it's like not spiritual. And then I'm like, actually, it is spiritual, because I'm crocheting these things for people and they have really good energy in them. And so I'm also going to advertise it as, look, I'm now working on a stuffed animal that's a dragon, and I'm actually putting energy in this animal, like with intention. It's like how people sell candles that are charged with angelic energy or all this other stuff. And I'm like, that is exactly what it is. That's exactly what I'm doing. So we are bringing spirituality in all of these things. There's people that are like into spiritual gardening. That is more and more becoming a thing. People that are doing landscaping, but in a way that there's like sacred geometry involved. And like that you're generating some kind of a spiritual frequency in your yard or in your garden. And that is things that I've seen in Atlantean Akashic records, that people were making conscious gardens. Stuff like that is coming back.
It's really interesting. So obviously I was saying, I don't know if I said it on here or when we were talking before, but I've just been to India. So I've been reading the Bhagavad Gita and some books that I bought in temples and stuff like that. And within like the Krishna conscious movement, there is that the sitting still meditation is for the foolish, because the mind wasn't made to be still. And that actually come to me, I think it was yesterday or the day before, because I struggle to sit down and meditate and just to be still. If you watch this video, I've probably moved and adjusted myself like 100 times. Like, it's something that I kind of struggle with, and just understanding that we wasn't made to be still. And I think, again, we keep going back to the other podcast, but we'd said sometimes one of the most spiritual things that we can do is sit and watch Netflix. That's enough to just turn the brain off. And so I'm moving more into my human era, same way of what you're saying is it's still a conscious, meditative, spiritual activity. Crocheting, painting, they're still very meditative activities, but it stops you from just sitting. And I think that's important, especially when you've got a busy mind, is to, because I'm assuming, like me, sometimes I'll be washing up and that's when I get the best downloads, because I'm just completely in the task that I'm doing, because it's took me out of my mind and into my body. What I wanted to say is the dragons that you're making are something very tangible that we need, maybe to draw us closer to that kind of dragon energy, because there's something physical that you can touch and help strengthen the connection. I think it's lovely, and I think they're really cute.
Yeah. And that's
think,
actually the download that I got around it too. Is like, yes, but you're going to be making them for children and introducing them to their dragons. And then, because it's like you said, you don't have to sit still. to be meditating. And I even posted a reel about that on Instagram where I filmed myself crocheting, and I get the most downloads when I'm doing something with my hands or when I'm cooking or whatever. And I got all these downloads like, yeah, you're going to make more of these, and they're going to give you their names. So they're going to each have their own name. And that's how you're going to give them to people or sell them or offer them. And they're all going to have their own unique frequency, and they're always going to find the exact person that they need. And when you look at it, it's the same with crystals, like these crystal skulls that they sell or crystals. They always find the exact person that they need.
I think even as you were speaking then, like my guides have just got my attention in terms of you weaving codes into the threads, into, I'm totally on board with it, Deborah. I get the whole theology and everything behind like what you're kind of doing there. And I think, and again, it's testament to how long that you've been on the path. I mean, when people ask me my hobbies, I'm like, oh, healing and like spirituality and and I think it's coming to a point now where they're no longer my hobbies, they're just a part of my being. It's who I am, it's just what I do, to the point where, like you, I'm being drawn to more creative tasks. Like I've always had this innate burning desire to do fashion, to learn to sew and do that, and that's something that keeps bringing my attention. Like I think I can no longer sit and do all of the healing as my hobbies, because it doesn't feel like a hobby anymore. It just, I get a download, I process, I move on, and I do what I do. So I think for me, it comes back to being a human, because ultimately we are spiritual beings, but we're here to have a human experience. So I think we need to, again, it comes back to that full circle, doesn't it? You'll come full circle and you'll be like, no, actually I want to be a human. And I think at the beginning of your awakening and stuff, you can get quite weighed in the ethers and all the magic and all of that untangible stuff that you can't see, that we forget that we're here to be human. I think like everyone wants to be in the clouds, but we'll get that chance again when we pass over and we go back to our essence. Like we'll get the part to be in the ethers. So maybe it is time to move into that era where it's human things that we like to do, but with our spirituality still kind of in the mix, not as a separate part of us.
Yeah, and that brings me back to the Essenes. I know I mentioned them a lot, the Jesus and the Essenes, but when you listen to the story of Joseph, who was a carpenter, and he enjoyed doing that, but he was also an alchemist. He was a high initiate priest in the Essene order. And at the same time, he was just doing his job. He was creating things for people. He was creating furniture. And Jesus was indeed his apprentice, was learning his trade. And at the same time, Jesus was studying with the masters in India, studying with the Druids in Britain. And he also enjoyed making furniture. All of these things, like, and there's other, like, all these people in these mystery schools had a trade or a thing that they were very good at. One person was great at weaving baskets, another person was good at pottery, another person was really good at gardening, cooking. Everyone had their thing that they truly enjoyed doing with their hands, because they understood the value of being in a physical body and manifesting energy on this physical plane, because you're basically translating all of these high frequencies into something physical for those that don't have access yet to all of these high frequencies, I feel.
It's interesting times, isn't it? I think when you compare the conversations that we've had to our catch up, like just how in sync we are, it always makes me laugh, like when I'm so connected to someone, just how in sync we are in terms of our thoughts. And I think it's quite nice to know that I'm not the only rebel that's like, no, I just want to be a human, and I'll do it with an element of spirituality like weaved throughout what I'm doing. It's interesting times, isn't it? I think that's kind of the cusp of where I'm at with things. Like it's an interesting time to be alive and incarnated on earth as a human.
And I think that's literally like the line that I use in every podcast description is being a human on a spiritual journey. I think I've written that in every caption of every podcast in this Astral Attic series, because I also didn't want to go for like some fluffy name like the New Earth podcast, or I don't know, something, because it's just like, what do people resonate with? Oh yeah, an attic. Like, because I used to have a friend when I was growing up, he lived in an attic and he turned it into like a nice lounge room, and it was fun. Like, people would go up to his attic to hang out, to talk, to catch up, and it was just cozy. There were little couches, it was nice, there was mood lighting, and we would have spiritual conversations. This was one of my friends when I was growing up that was into spirituality, that was open to all these things. But we were also human. We would go party on the weekends, we would have fun, and they were just really laid back conversations. And that's what I guess we have to try to achieve. If you are too much in the physical and like everything is physical, the rest doesn't exist, or you are doing the opposite and you're just constantly avoiding the physical, and it's like everything that has to do with the physical world is evil. You cannot enjoy, like, there's people that are like, don't ever go to concerts, don't ever go and eat junk food, don't listen to music, don't blah blah blah. I don't think, like, if we as souls chose to be here on this earth, which is a playground, one of the many playgrounds of Mother, Father, God, why would we not play with all the tools that are available to us? I feel.
I do think it's interesting. Like, we'll just do what we want to do. What I have found is the more conscious, I don't know what to describe it as, but the more whoever I am is becoming, the less I kind of enjoy different things. You know, like, I'm quite happy just this is kind of what I crave. I remember, like, when I was in India, my partner was like, you're gonna have to buy another bag because you're gonna do all this shopping and all of this stuff, and it was almost like I had no interest in the things. So I do wonder if, I mean, I don't drink, so this is probably quite a biased opinion, but drinking, raves, like all of that, theme parks, I no longer enjoy a theme park because it's too kind of overstimulating. It has got me thinking whether those, it's not to say if you enjoy them, if you've got an issue, but I don't know whether for me, all of those things were kind of, they make me feel stuff. But because I can feel things again, that I find them overstimulating. It's a really interesting kind of dichotomy of stuff. So I didn't need an extra suitcase because I didn't buy half of India. Like, I'll go out and I'll need to come back quite quickly to just, I like, and I'm almost craving a slow and steady and peaceful life. I don't know whether that is contradictory to me being a human and doing the things. It just doesn't seem to be as much external things that'll fill that void anymore. It's complicated at best, I think, is the kind
No,
of like,
I understand it. I think if you're like me, then you were at the height of your party years 20 years ago.
oh, absolutely.
So that's what it is. I went to a lot of parties, twice, like two on one weekend often, especially when I first moved out on my own. I lived in a tiny studio apartment. Friday I was gone, Saturday I was gone. And because I was looking for this spiritual, this thing, I was looking for something that was, and I was just looking for it everywhere. And yeah, and I think then I did do the opposite. I completely isolated myself from the world, became this oracle, and like, yes, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be this oracle and isolate myself. But I kind of merged it with the things that do charge my battery up again. Like, right now, I would not enjoy going to a theme park. I don't know if it's because I'm just getting older or it's just too much energies from people. And because I do a lot of spiritual work, just walking around. But because I'm also doing readings for people, multiple readings a week for people, you're constantly working with energy. I'm creating portraits for people. I'm always in somebody's energy or channeling something. I'm like channeling every day. If it's for my blog, sometimes it's for a podcast, sometimes it's always something. It's Akashic Records. And then I need earth activities that are actually going to be good for me, that aren't going to require more from me. And like going to the grocery store is also like, okay, I have a system and it's called like the 5 credit social system. I have 5 credits, and this is how I explained it to my daughter, because she's very extroverted, blah 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 blah, she's always talking. So I told her, this is what I did in Spain, because in Spain everyone's loud. They're talking. And I said, look, I have 5 credits right now. If I go do this activity, that takes 3 credits out of my system, and I have 2 left. If I go do this activity with you, then I have 1 credit that I lost. I still have 4 left. What do you think I should do? And she's like, oh, okay, I see what you mean. Instead of going to the swimming pool with a ton of loud people, let's go to the park and let's sit there together. Let's go over there. And so that's how I tried explaining to her what is good for me. And I can then sit on the bench, fully be focused on some flowers, and fully see everything that's going on with these flowers, the bugs, and just be completely looking at what they're doing. Or this bug is trying to get some food and I'm just looking at it. And that's how I'm present with what's happening here. And I can enjoy social interactions and I'll be with people and it'll be fun. But I could never do that 2 nights in a row with like a whole group of people. That would not be possible anymore. Because I think in the past, a lot of people, they do things because it's expected of them, and they think, oh, I'm going to be considered rude if I leave this party early, or if I say, hey, this is not good for me, I'm feeling drained. People are going to take it personally. Oh, what's wrong with you? What am I doing wrong? When it's nothing wrong with you, I just feel that I now need a break. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's finding a nice balance, isn't it? Because I like to go out for food, or I'll go to theatre and things like that. But it's having that balance, isn't it? Like I definitely, almost certainly could not do 2 things back to back. Like, and I almost have to know that I've got some time either side of doing so. I love being social, and I'm a walking contradiction of all that I am. I'm an introverted extrovert. Like there's all these facets of myself, but I think it's honoring that need for the balance between knowing that I can go out and have fun or meet with a group of people, but just knowing that maybe doing that 2 nights, 3 nights is probably going to be a bit much, because I really do genuinely enjoy my own company. Like I think for years I'd spent so long running away from myself that maybe over the last few years I've got too comfortable in just being in my own company, that maybe I've shut off a lot of those things, because I'm just happy being by myself doing my own thing. Whether again 6 months, 12 months, there'll be a flip side. And because I think you said you shut yourself off for a while, maybe I'm still in my kind of isolation, I like that kind of thing. Maybe it'll change, maybe this is who I've always been. That's something that I do question, because I think even I'd go partying 2, 3, 4, 5 times a night, yeah, probably, but a week, and I'd be so drained. And I remember like there was this clock across, we always used to go to the same nightclub, and the dentist across the street had a clock, and I'd always be the one sat on the table staring at the clock like, is it time to go home yet? So I do wonder whether I've always been this kind of introverted person, but as you say, I did all of those things because that's what's expected of me. They're things that I'm constantly kind of trying to understand, but the more I look back, the more I think I'd have been quite happy to stay at home when I was a teenager. I just was doing what all my friends were doing, type of thing.
Yeah, and I think if you are not aware of the fact that you're sensitive. And I think a lot of introverts, when they're out, they reach this point in the evening where they're like, yep, I've had enough. I'm going. I like, it's just there. Yep, social credits have run out. It's time to go home. And now we recognize that. But I think when we were 19, 18 years old, we're like, oh, I don't feel good anymore, but you're going to ignore it. You're just going to ignore it because everyone else is still having fun. So, but I remember thinking too, because we would stay out till like 8 in the morning. And then it was like 3, and I'm like, oh my God, I actually am bored. I now want to go home. But then you have to depend on other people because you're driving with other people. And I was like, oh my God, I have to be here for 5 more hours. And you start walking around and you start just, and I would sit there sometimes, I was just like sitting, like waiting for time to go home. And now I recognize that that was me being overstimulated because there was loud music, lights, people, all this noise. And then it's like, okay, I've had it now. I'm now running on reserves, and then the next day you're completely drained. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I think you're spot on in terms of like just processing that myself, that was probably I've had enough, but not being able to say I've had enough. Whereas now I'll come out, but I think the people that I surround myself with now understand me in general. And I think that's quite the beauty of like the friends that I have. But I was like, oh, I've had enough, I'm going home, and no one will question it. Like it's just like, oh, she's had enough, she's going home, and that's the end of it. Whereas I think when we were younger, people would try and encourage us to stay out and be like, oh, just stay out, stay out. And then the people pleaser in me would have just been, oh, I'll stay out. And I had a miserable time because I just wanted to go home and go to bed and get under the cover and hide away for a bit. So I suppose it's nice that we learn those things about ourselves and then change and surround ourselves with people that also honor those needs within us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can even see, like, when I look back at those party years, like I used to go to a lot of like underground parties, like raves and stuff that wasn't necessarily like the cops like didn't know about, so it was all kind of illegal. um and a lot of these took place in like abandoned warehouses, abandoned places, like the harbor in Antwerp in Belgium is a big place where a lot of these things are organized, or were back then anyway. And there's loud music, but because I think those things were organized by alternative people that were looking for an alternative way of partying. And a lot of the times there were 2 rooms, and there was like the main stage with like the loud music and all the bright lights, and then often there was like another smaller room attached to the main room where it was like chill music, chill lighting, pillows, little couches for people that if they wanted a break from the loud music they could go and relax. So what I would do once I hit my like 0 on the credit meter was like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna go sit for 5 hours in the other room and just relax. And you could have conversations with people without having super loud music. And so I think that's why I gravitated towards those types of parties a lot, because there were more sensitive people. And I found that's where I found kind of my kind of people when I was going out and partying. And the funny thing is that later in Belgium, in my daughter's elementary school, they had like all of the regular toys out there, like all the typical noisy kindergarten toys, and like a little kitchen, dress up corner, instruments, all this loud stuff. And then there was one area in the entire building with pillows, with dim little lights, where they could go and they could choose when they were overwhelmed. They chose to go there for a little bit, however long they wanted to be there. Maybe they just wanted to be there for 15 minutes. Maybe they wanted to stay there for an hour. It was all up to them. And it reminded me of that. It's like how funny that if you let a human decide what they want to do, that we still need those things as an adult. We need a space where we can recharge and kind of calm down our central nervous system.
You're younger years clubbing sounds like my teenage years dream. She'd have loved that.
Yeah, I think, and it was also, there was all this like psychedelic decorations and butterflies and all this psychedelic stuff. It was like mainly psytrance and techno music and all this stuff. And I felt like I was in some kind of other dimension. And it was also a way to connect, I see now, with all these other realms.
Yeah. See, I wasn't spiritual as a young pet. Well, I say that. I clearly have always been who I am, but it was under so many layers. So I think I spent all of that time just lost, so lost. I was lost until I was like 30. Like, just spent my whole life trying to come back to this version of myself. I was thinking the other week that myself at that age, so it's funny that we've come back to talk about those versions of ourselves, would just be so proud of the woman that we've become, because I think who I am now is who I was searching for. And I think that was such a beautiful realization, to look back and be able to honor that that is what I was searching for, which is really nice. And I don't know if that even fits in. I just thought it was a poignant point, that the synchronicity of talking about those years, that I think at that time, I don't even know if I knew what I needed or what I wanted, because it was so confusing. It's interesting that's a lot of the work that I do is looking at like our inner child or inner adolescent, those kind of ages and stages of ourselves, because that's who we show up as an adult. Is it, if we're stunted at a particular age, then when you react in your 20s, 30s, 40s, you might be 8, or you could be 12, you could be 18, or whatever point that you got stuck. So that's a lot of the work that I'm moving into doing now, is kind of bringing that out into the world in terms of looking at those facets of ourselves, because I think it's really important. I don't know how I've got onto that, but that come back to like the younger me and stuff, and just understanding those facets of yourself are what I think brings you closer to your spirituality and your essence.
I think that is actually perfect, because that kind of ties everything that we've talked about together, like how we navigate in this world, this program, this construct, how we're often not honoring ourselves as children. We have these programs that we are just following. And then when we're adults, we see where in childhood we weren't honoring ourselves, but we also often weren't given any choice. And I think that's probably a good point to kind of start wrapping up the podcast, so that we don't go like for 5 hours, because we probably could if you would let us. But that gives us more food for thought for another podcast later, because I'm pretty sure we're definitely gonna be back. And yeah, so where can people find you online? I'm also going to put it all in the description. It's all going to be written in the description. So what are your plans for the future? What are you going to be doing? And where can people find you or contact you?
So I'm just operating as myself at the moment. So I've just got a Facebook page, and I'm working off there, kind of offering my musings and my ponderings. There's a magazine in the work that I'm going to have a column on, where we start to unpick some of these things and we discuss the topics that we have, but then we're going to invite other readers to write in so that we can ponder wider theories and things. And then from next week, there's going to be that kind of that inner child, inner adolescent, that work's going to start to like pop up. There'll be links and stuff over on my Facebook page. I think I am at a point now where I'm coming out of the closet. I come and I'll have these conversations and I bring a lot of wisdom, but I think I've kept a lot of it from myself, and that's what I've been working on recently, is that witch wound, something that we've discussed in terms of my previous lives and being scared to be that teacher. So it's all a little bit all over the place, but if you get to know me, then you'll know that that is just who I am in general, but there's beauty and there's magic held within the chaos.
And that is, I think, the best way to show up, because people are going to be able to relate to you, because I don't think there's a single person on this planet that's like, oh, my life is chaos free, it is perfect. I don't think in this time that just does not exist.
No. So yeah, come and find me on Facebook, or I'm sure you'll pop the links in and stuff, won't you, if anyone's interested in finding out more about my chaotic world.
Yes. Well, I enjoyed it as always. I enjoy having you on my podcast.
Thank you, Deborah.